Welcome to Speaking from Experience, a District 123 podcast hosted by Ayesha Hussain. With Toastmasters International spanning over 148 countries, with more than 270,000 members, the annual quest for excellence unfolds as more than 30,000 members compete for the top spot at the World Championship of Public Speaking. District 123 has been a launching pad for many of these Toastmasters determined to compete at the world stage. In this podcast, you'll have the pleasure of hearing from some of those accomplished speakers as they share their experiences and reveal what it took to achieve excellence in the world of public speaking. Get ready for insightful conversations with members from District 123 as they share with you their journey to greatness.
Hello, and welcome back to your very own podcast, Speaking from Experience, presented by District 123 with your host, Ayesha Hussain. Our guest today is a writer and author of released expressions. He has chartered a Toastmasters Club specifically for writers. He's a leader who leads by example. He is Stephen Peart. Welcome to the show. Thank you for giving us your time. Stephen, while I was introducing you, your title, Released Expressions, it's striking so many chords. Can you tell us why that title and what was the thought process behind it?
Wow, that is a story in itself, which actually started off when I was 9 years old. So I wanted to write songs, and that was, I thought, my passion. And as any writer, I decided you got a piece of paper and you start writing, and nothing will come. I don't know if you watch those movies where you actually see people trying to write and then they crumb the paper and they toss in the waste basket.
Mm-hmm.
That was me. It got to a point where I was just writing, nothing was coming. Basket. And then one day my dad walked into the room and he got so upset. It's like, what are you doing? Because that was his paper that I was using. And at a point I just said to him, I went, hey, Dad, I want to write songs. And all he said to me was, read the Bible. And he walked out the room. That was it. And after that, I never took a pen in my hands to write again. The only writing I did was when I went to university. I had to write my papers. That was the only writing I did.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward 9 years later, I was living in New York, moved to a new country, didn't know anybody other than my aunt, my uncle, and a couple people. New culture, new life, and everything was just different. I was sheltered and again didn't have a voice. And then one evening, I came home, and this part is a little emotional for me. But I came home and I had an argument with my aunt, and I went to my room. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with writing pads with the rule lines.
Yes,
We used to write letters.
Yes.
When people used to write letters.
Yes.
Well, I had one of those, 100 pages,
Mm-hmm.
and I sat in my bed from 10 p.m. until 3 a.m. the next day. And I completed back and front of that writing pad. I would not stop writing. And I just poured everything out of my heart. And at the end of it, that's when Release Expressions was born.
Wow. So I want to ask you, when you were writing it, it was, and a lot of children, especially nowadays, and I know we talk about social media and it's so easy, we are tweeting and posting, but are we really putting the emotions out there? And I want to understand, when you did this whole exercise from 10 p.m. to 3 a.m., what it did that for you and how important it is, especially for generations today who don't really take time to write. It's just like, like this post, don't like this post, or ha ha, or so much emojis. How important putting it on paper it is?
Aisha, that's an amazing question. In fact, I firmly believe writing on paper, which I still do, other than the odd times when I'm actually writing on my phone or my computer, but writing on paper actually does something to you mentally and emotionally. Because literally, you're seeing your hands are actually going across that piece of paper. You have this pen in your hands, you're feeling it, but you're also feeling something coming from deep inside. And and I think that's why I really used the word released expressions, because one of the books I actually wrote was called Words from the Heart. I didn't publish that one, but I just have the manuscript sitting in my library called Words from the Heart. And everything was coming from the inside, and I was just basically releasing it on paper. And I could feel everything coming up through my hands and just basically scribbling on the paper. And that I believe is so important. And I think this generation is actually missing out on actually writing on paper, even writing letters.
Yes.
I did a workshop a couple of weeks ago, and one of the challenge I gave to the group was actually to write a letter to someone that means something to you, or did inspired you in some way. Go to the and put in an envelope and mail it to them. Actually went and bought stamps and gave it to them, even more to give them the impetus
Yeah.
to actually do it. So writing on paper, I firmly believe is a powerful thing.
Because I remember as kids when we were growing up and we were trying to, because in India we have exams even like from primary schools and kindergartens. And whenever we were prepping for exam, I remember my dad telling us that write it down. It's easier to memorize it. You don't have to read it 10 times. You write it twice and it's already ingrained in you. So coming to that point, I want to ask you, a lot of people, and I've seen a lot of motivational speaking and say, write down your goals, write down your dream, and send it to the universe. What does that writing, how does that change the mindset?
I believe writing things out, um, it touches all your senses, more so your sight. Um, but there's the hearing aspect, which a lot of people tend to miss out on. And this is part of one of my workshops as well, is after you write, read, because you can see it, but when you read it, you actually hear it. So you're touching another aspect of your senses there. Um, I use prompts and visualization to get the sense of smell and touch. Now, you may not necessarily see it or feel it, but just imagine that you're there in that image and you're seeing it and you're feeling it. It's stimulating so many aspects of your entire being. So I the big piece for me really is, even as a writer, is you want to touch every aspect, every area of all your senses. Your eyes, your ears, your nose, your voice, and that's a big part of the journey. Really, is the voice, because right now I'm working with a number of people in writing their books, and one of the consistent things I've been hearing is they want their voice to be heard. Everybody wants their voice to be heard. Um, but you have to start somewhere. And writing I think, is one of the best places to start.
And I'm going to play a little bit of a devil's advocate here because I personally love the books, the smell, and
same.
everything. Yes. Please do so. Because this is a struggle that I've heard from a lot of parents of teenagers. They do digital writing. Isn't it the same? You coming from a writing background who's had the opportunity to do that, and you said you do sometimes on phone or laptop. How is it different and why is it more important or more impactful? to do it on paper and pen rather than digital writing, because the argument goes, the thoughts are still coming. Instead of pen, I'm typing. I can still read it out loud. I can do all of those things. And instead of a paper smell, I can smell my electronics. So you're still evoking all of those senses. How is it paper more impactful in your opinion?
Paper is more impactful in the sense that you can carry it with you anywhere. Um, there, there are times when, I thought, because sometimes I write prose.
Sure.
There's times when a pro or something comes and I want to remember it. I'll write it on a piece of either my placard or just a piece of paper. Or sometimes I'm like in a restaurant or somewhere eating and I don't have any paper with me. I'll get a napkin.
I was going to say that.
I'll get a napkin and I actually write on it and I have it. And eventually I'll go to my computer. Because part of the thing is you want to capture everything
Yes.
In a digital format so you can actually use it later.
Right.
Right now in my library, I have 2 sections on my shelf with just books of written out content. In my bag, there are 2 books, written out content that I just write in the book. But here's the beautiful thing about it. When you write it on paper in a book, the beautiful thing about it is I put it on the shelf, and then one day I'll get out of bed and I'll go to the library and I'll just pull one of the books and start reading it. And I'm reading it and I'm like, oh my God, did I write this? Because literally you totally forget about everything and you sit and you're reading it. I'm like, did this come from me? And I think it actually builds your confidence to a point where you now start to recognize that, hey, I'm actually a writer. I'm not just scribbling words, but I'm actually putting words together. Now, is it something that I would necessarily publish right away? Not necessarily, but it instilled within your mind, within your brain, with your whole psyche that, hey, I have the ability to communicate something to somebody else in writing.
So you just talked about publishing a book, and I want to ask you, a lot of people write journaling or stories, and somehow when they write and how they speak are different. There is a little bit of a difference pattern, at least I've noticed in my style. But when you talk about books being published or material worthy of publishing, how important it is to enhance it with fancier and bigger words to make it look you are the master of the topic? Or do you advise the new aspiring writers to use more simpler language rather than adding thou art this and thou art that, and instead of simple, hey, you should be doing this?
I chuckle at your question because it was a question that was posed to me on Thursday when I was doing one of my coaching sessions. And person I'm working with right now, that's one of their challenges because they're thinking, oh, I need to get my words together. They need to be impactful and powerful. And earlier when we were chatting before we started broadcasting, I said to you, I said, I like things simple and easy.
Right.
And I firmly believe that's the thing because people are looking to read something simple and easy to catch on to something memorable. Putting a big word in your book is only going to put the person in a position where they're like, okay, what does that word mean? And then they'll have to go to a dictionary or Google. Like, what does that mean?
Yes.
And that breaks the flow of the conversation. It's almost like we're talking and I give you a big word and you're stopping me and said, oh, what does that word mean? The flow of the conversation stops.
Right.
But when you keep your content simple, easy to read, and the word that I actually gave the person, was authentic.
Yes.
I think that in itself is more important than anything else. We have to be ourselves because there's nobody else.
Right.
And people are looking for who you are, not what you are or what you represent, but who you really are. And that is important when you're actually your book together, when you're writing. Yeah, the tone, the voice in writing may differ from when you're speaking, but keep it simple, keep it short, and keep it sweet.
Okay. Short, simple, and sweet. So, somebody who writes longer sentences, you would advise them to chop it and keep it in simpler so that it's easier for the reader to understand and relate. So, if I sum it in this way to say that rather than focusing on being eloquent, being more understandable should be the goal.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, the eloquence will come out with the editing, and that's what editors are there for, to help you with, okay, this is your sentence. Here's how we can actually position this to make it a little bit more impactful, for the reader to read. And that's the job of an editor, really. But as the writer, you really want to bring out the core essence of yourself, which makes it actually easier for the editor because their job now is not to bring out you, but to empower those words that you've actually expressed to bring power and impact, eloquence, for the reader to actually get the message even more impactful.
Okay. So, since I definitely do want to publish my own book on multiple topics, one being mental health, but when you talk about, so like for example, I'm passionate about mental health. Is there any cause you are passionate about?
I am too. June is Men's Mental Health Month, and nobody speaks about it.
Yes, I do. And this is going to be a little derailing from
I know. I didn't want to say it, but
because I
you
talk
brought it.
about, I mean, obviously being a woman, I focus on women's mental health.
Right.
And I come from a family of men. I don't have sisters or aunts. I grew up with boys, brothers, uncles, and around them. And I've always seen them, as we talk about men, is that they are this embody of strong and strength. My dad cannot fall. He can do no wrong. And now, in retrospective, when I think back, that adds a lot of pressure.
Yep.
So I know you are a dad as well. From that perspective, since we talked about June's men's mental health, if you were to say 3 things to your fellow
Males.
fathers and male figures out there, what they can do, and because I realize that men struggle to come out as emotional being because they have that shield. And I'm not saying that all men are like that, but definitely most are, who are raised to that men don't cry. Or even we have heard raised, oh, why are you crying like a girl? Obviously, as a girl, I find that offensive. But how important it is for a man to be able to cry and release that emotions.
It is so, so important because built up emotions, um, not managed well, creates destruction, especially for men because we're more physical beings, whereas women are more emotional. And if we're constantly building up all of these un hoarding, I would say hoarding these emotions, eventually there's going to be an outlet that it has to go into. My outlet was actually writing. Um, I had a lot of emotions pent up inside of me, and writing allows me that outlet. But one thing I'll actually encourage men to do, and this is something that I speak with guys about, and females who actually come to me and talk to me about their husbands or their significant partner, I tell them, well, the first question I always ask him, does he have male friends? And I tell you, every time I ask that question, the answer is always no. And I tell him, I said, well, that's the issue. I'm like, as men, we need other male friends. We need men in our lives, because that's where we're able to express ourselves in a safe environment, um, where men need to actually talk and understand, hey, this is what I'm going through. Because here's the thing with guys, we will listen, but we're not looking to fix. And when a guy shares what he's going through, he's not looking for somebody to fix it. He's looking for somebody to talk to about it. Um, I remember when I was going through. I experienced a depression in 2018, just before I joined Toastmasters, actually. And I had a friend, and we used to call it our garbage disposal session. And we'll just sit there, or we go for a walk or something, and we just talked. I would just express every single thing that was going on in my head and just talked. And he would do the same. And after we're finished, it was disposed of, gone, and we moved on, and we just went about doing other different things. So one, find another male friend, trusted friend, that you can actually just talk and express yourself. The second thing is work with your hands. Do something with your hands. I like gardening. I like planting plants and seeing it grow. I like writing. But do something with your hands. And then the third piece I would say is exercise. Whether it's going to the gym, going for walks. I love going for walks by the lake, going for a bike ride, hiking. Find a physical activity. And I think those three things were my core that helped me through my depression. Uh, and that's what helps me to this day to deal with all the things that you have to contend with as a man in life. So one, find a trusted friend or a circle of guys that you can actually talk with. Two, find something to do, work with your hands, whether it's painting, writing, um, painting your house, doing some carpentry, whatever it is. And then the third piece, exercise. Get outdoors, do something physical. And I think those three things are core to helping with men's mental health.
I really hope our listeners are listening to this and try to put that in practice. But you brought out the word, the big, not so much talked about, the D word, depression. It's still very new where people acknowledge that, yes, they've been diagnosed with depression or they're going through depression. Most people tend to mask it. When you decided to talk about it, and if you're comfortable talking about this in a public platform, how or when you decided that, yes, you know what, I'm going to accept it, I'm going to talk about it, and how did the society around you take it, or what helped you move on from that?
Aisha, that is probably the, what's the word? The question that should be asked. Because even when I went through and after I came through it, I would hear these messages. If you're going through depression, talk about it, talk about it. And it's easy said than done. Um, because I know a lot of people are suffering. The question is, who do I talk to? And I'm like, I was fortunate. I was very, very fortunate. I had not a blood mom, but I call her my mom. And she actually took me in to her home and basically cared for me. And I never forget, her daughter was visiting her, and she just asked me, like, Stephen, what's going on? And I felt comfortable with them because they were trusted.
Yes.
And I shared, and I said, this is what's happening with me. And I told them. And thankfully, she experienced it as well. She experienced everything that I was actually going through. And her comments, again, short, simple and sweet. She said, well, Stephen, all you need to do is get outside. And fortunately, I went through my depression during the summertime, which was a blessing in itself.
Yes.
Just get outside, get in the sun, go to the park, just lie down and just stare at the sun, go for long walks, and just do that. And for the duration of the time, I literally actually walked the distance from Toronto to Ottawa and back within 3 months.
Oh, wow.
Because that's what I did. I walked every single morning, got out into the sun, um, just soaked up all of that vitamin D, and that's what took me through. And I had those two trusted persons, and then there are a couple other individuals that came into my life during that time that I felt comfortable and at peace. Two other persons invited me, come and stay with me. Um, I stayed with them a couple of days, but that kind of helped taking me through that period, because it was devastating. It was rough, and I would not wish it for anybody in the world to experience something like that, because going through depression and mental health is very, very belittling and literally can rob you of everything.
Oh, yes.
No matter how healthy you may be physically, but mentally, if you're not there, you're no good to yourself or to anybody else for that matter.
That I totally relate to that. I've been clinically and chronically diagnosed with depression myself, and there have been times where I have amazing children, amazing family, but nothing seemed to add value to it. And so that's why when someone's open and talk about depression, I like to understand what helped them, because I've realized something, that as in physical health, they are standardized. Oh, you have a headache, take a Tylenol, take Advil, and it's one for all. But when it comes to mental health, it's
What do you take?
it doesn't apply.
Yeah.
That what may work for you may not work for me. What works for me may not work for somebody else. And that's the reason I like to talk more about it, to hear what worked for you, so that any of our listeners who feels that they're in dark space, that any of these tips can help you. And that's why I like to ask, because I can share my life and say, oh, I did this, I did that, but not necessarily will work for them.
Yeah.
So the more people come out and talk about it, and as you said, you've been very, very fortunate where you had such a good support system. Not everyone is as lucky. I've been very fortunate myself. I had a good support system, but I also had people say, how can you have depression? It's just in your head. Or, you have a good job, you have a roof over your head, you have nothing to do, so you're creating things in your head. And my only response was, yeah, it's in my head, but not the way you're saying it. So, if anybody facing such comments, because at that point, you're already in a very, very, very dark space. And somebody who's not as fortunate enough to have support like you and I have had, and they're facing with such negative comments, what's one piece you would say? And again, from your experience, may or may not work for you, but what you would tell them that maybe this can help you, despite all the negatives you're hearing.
Stay away from negative people. I can't emphasize that even more. I know, but you gotta cut them out and do it in a respectful way. Because I'll give you a quick story. There was, and actually we're still friends to this day. There's this friend of mine, coworker. They called me on the phone one day, and I was excited. I'm like, oh God, somebody's calling me, and I say hello, and we're talking, and they started just being negative, and I could feel
Bringing
the
it,
pain
yeah.
coming on, and at that point I'm just like, no, I'm not gonna accept this. And I just said to them, I said, you know what, I'm gonna have to stop the conversation now. Let's talk another time. And I hung up, because I had to protect myself. And it's hard when you're so vulnerable, because you want people in your life.
Yes.
But the wrong people in your life will destroy you in that moment. Now, keep in mind that it's not, you're not going to totally cut them off. But in that moment, you have to protect yourself. So find when you face those negative folks, respectfully, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to stop this, and just walk away. Don't feel bad about it, because your mental health is more important. If you're not healed, then you can't engage again with that individuals at a later time.
Right.
Because frankly, they don't understand what's going on. And that's the unfortunate thing about mental health. With physical, if I have a cut, everybody understands that you're bleeding and they can put a band-aid over it. But if you're going through mental health, nobody understands that. And eventually, once you get healthy, and this is the conversations that we now have, is to help those individuals who have never experienced it to understand, hey, this is what they're actually going through. And the folks that actually were able to help me, they understood it.
Yes.
And they were able to walk with me alongside and help me through that process.
Yes. So if you want to climb Mount Everest, go to someone who's already done it.
Exactly.
So going back to now writing, and we talked about release expression.
Yeah.
With somebody, I do a lot of writing where it helps me heal. And I do want to put a book together, but this is a question because a lot of trauma, and I think that happens when you've not healed completely. You tend to believe that one hurt me, this one hurt me, that one hurt me, and because of you I'm in depression, because of you I'm in anxiety. And when you're putting it in a book, but you still have relationships with those people, you don't want to make anybody sound like a villain. Mm-hmm. How do you respectfully put that in a book?
Brilliant question. And actually, that's a tough one. So when I wrote my book, part of my journey was I struggled with my mom. And I used to blame her for being the one that actually suppressed my voice. But I wrote about it and I expressed it. Here's the healing part though, is have a conversation with the individual before you even put it in the book.
Okay.
And talk with them, just express it. Because again, oftentimes people do things and they're not even aware of it. They're not even aware of what they're actually doing. But if we have the conversation, we express ourselves and say, hey, Ayesha, this is what happened. And this is what you did. And this is how it impacted my life. However, because of what you did, it has actually given me an opportunity to write this story. And I really want to share this because it's bringing healing to me and it's healing to us. So pull them into it as well. And I want us to move forward because your ability to draw this out of me is really helping me to become a better person.
Right.
And I want to share this with you. I want to share others with you. Give me the permission to do that. Ask them the permission. I'm sure people will actually, yeah, sure. You don't have to put actual names or you don't have to point to an individual, but tell the story. If people like to know that they're part of your journey, and bringing them into that journey with them helps them to appreciate you a lot more. And we as people, we're social beings, and being social, making connections and developing and growing from that is so important. And what better place to do it than in a book? Because hey, it's going to be possibly for the next generation. Somebody else was seeing it. I don't know if you've ever done your family tree, but if you're doing your family tree, that book can be passed on. I'm like, oh, grandma and grandpa was this and this was there. And you understand what their lives were to make it better for your life and for the lives to come.
I'm actually doing a family recipe book, and it's writing about the history, who did it and what did it, and bring the whole story about it. And we take a picture. But on that note, we have a question for you actually from our last guest, Alexander Matt. He left you a question.
What is one embarrassing or shameful thing that you did that you've never told anyone?
What's an embarrassing and shameful thing that
you haven't told anybody.
told anyone.
Now you've got it.
And now I have to tell all of Toastmasters. Oh my God.
Maybe the world outside Toastmasters, because it's on YouTube. So.
To the world?
Yes. Thank you for choosing our platform to share it.
Thank you, Alex. He's up north, right?
Yes.
Which day can I go up north? That might be an embarrassing and shameful thing to do, to go see him. What's
But we're talking about past, not what you're planning.
Well, I'm a writer, so you got to be creative here. Okay, well, the one that comes to mind, well, it came very close to being very, very embarrassing. So I went to the Cayman Islands on vacation, and I literally did it because somebody said to me, I'm like, why are you going to the Cayman Islands? It's boring there. There's nothing. And I said, that's exactly what I want. I just want to go somewhere where it's boring and just quiet. So I went to the Cayman Islands, and then this particular day, I went to the beach, and there was nobody on the beach. And you're getting it, right? And I actually skinny dipped.
Okay.
But I was praying that nobody came to the beach when I was getting out of the water. So thankfully, I was able, well, not that I was aware of, because it's a pretty large beach and there were people in the distance, but not physically on the beach. So I survived that one.
You're lucky enough with everybody having camera phone nowadays.
Well, actually, that time camera phones, cell phones wasn't a thing. So
That's what I'm saying, you got-
so it's not on YouTube. So don't go searching for it. You'll only hear it on this channel and this channel only.
What can we say? We bring you all the deep and dark hidden secrets. And now on that jolly note, I'd like you to leave a question for our next guest.
So my question, I won't go the Alex route.
Okay.
My question for the next guest is, what would you write yourself in a book about?
What would you
Write yourself
in a book
about?
I think that's something even our audience can ponder on. Pick your pen and write your story. And I think that's a beautiful note to end on. Signing off, Ayesha Hussain. Until next time.
When I was a young child, my mama told me, son, don't ever let them make you afraid and never let them see you run.